Llegaron los ahorros de primavera a The Home Depot. ¿Y tú, en qué estás trabajando? Ya sea en tu patio, jardín o garage, el sistema de batería Ryobi One Plus le da potencia a más de 300 herramientas inalámbricas con un solo clic. Como a la sopladora o recortadora de cuerda Ryobi de 18 voltios, ahora a un nuevo precio más bajo de $129. Arranca todos tus proyectos con un clic, solo en The Home Depot. Haces más, logras más. Ya llegó la temporada de asados a The Home Depot. ¿Y tú, en qué estás trabajando? Si es en impresionar a tus invitados con tus asados, el asador de gas NexGrill con 4 quemadores es para ti a un precio bajo todos los días de $229. Además, también puedes encontrar todos los accesorios que necesitas para que tu carnita asada sea un éxito. Ahora sí, listo para ser el anfitrión de la temporada. Esta primavera, encuentra una gran variedad de asadores por menos de $300 en The Home Depot.
Hello, my name is Spencer, and in my podcast called The Dictionary, I literally read from the dictionary, but add in my personal comments and stupid jokes to make it more interesting. Episodes are family-friendly, short, and air every single day on basically every podcast platform. Come join me on this journey filled with edutainment.
Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is the podcast all about the movies you never saw, the scripts that were never filmed, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is David Spencer.
My name is Daniel Kaka.
And I'm Alexa Quizon.
We have Alexa back joining us once again.
Yeah.
For like your 5th episode or something like that.
It's been 5 episodes already.
I don't know. Maybe it's 4. It's really easy to book you as a guest, though, when your schedule is the same as mine.
Yeah, I'm a convenient guest.
And I am back after missing out last week.
Yeah, we had a really good talk all about Marvel. What's disappointing is that this is like one of your favorite subjects and you had to miss out on it.
Well, it's one of my favorite subjects, but I know that one of the required readings for last week was to watch Blade, and I've never seen Blade. I feel like I know a lot about current MCU stuff, but that late 90s, early 2000s era of Marvel, I feel like I'm not as well versed on. So I'm really excited to listen to it.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a good time.
You never saw Daredevil?
Oh, right. I forgot about Daredevil.
No, I definitely have never seen Daredevil.
Yeah, I was so into that movie and I was like, yeah, this is one of the coolest superhero movies. And then I moved back to America from the Philippines and it turns out everybody hated it. And I felt like I was missing something.
The long and short of it is that Wesley Snipes learned to walk so that the MCU could run.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense.
It's pretty great. I think you're really going to love the episode. But we are not here to talk about Wesley Snipes or Blade or the MCU.
We're here to talk about a different early aughts creation.
Yeah. And Alexa, we brought you on because we are talking about one of your favorite subjects, dogs.
Yes. I thought it was because of my 2000s rom-com comedy era. Like, I thought I was being called out, to be honest.
This is an era of film that Alexa has a fondness for. I mean, one of her favorite movies is Josie and the Pussycats, which is just right in line with this kind of wacky, weird early aughts.
Okay, David is exaggerating. It's not my favorite movie. It's just a movie I look back on fondly. Mm-hmm. But David just has this obsession with me being obsessed with Josie and the Pussycats.
That's true.
And it's just not the case. I can't help that the album just slaps and bops so hard, but you know.
Dan, have you ever seen Josie and the Pussycats?
Not for a long, long time. I remember Tara Reid. I remember she was in it, but it has been so long since I've seen it.
That's a movie that Alexa and I watched, and I was like, that's terrible. It's an awful movie, but it also might be the greatest movie ever made. And looking up reviews, found a video essay about how Josie and the Pussycats is the greatest movie ever made. And it's incredible. I got to send that to you, Dan.
Josie and the Pussycats is the greatest movie of all time. It is better than Godfather, Star Wars, and Jaws combined because Josie and the Pussycats is amazing and it makes me feel good and it is the greatest movie of all time.
So before we step into the subject, I wanted to ask you to, first, let's start with Alexa. What is your history with Scooby-Doo?
Okay, Scoobert William Doo. And I have a very long history. Back in the Philippines, we did have Cartoon Network. I don't know if Scooby-Doo is Hanna-Barbera. I assume so.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, perfect, because there was a lot of Hanna-Barbera cartoons. I was watching the Flintstones, the Jetsons.
He was just born.
He was just born.
George Jetson, his birthday.
That's
his
right. It was just
canonical
recently.
birthday was a couple weeks ago.
And we're not flying yet, and I'm mad about it. I was promised. I know that there was also this show called Wacky Races. Very, very old school. I was so into it, though, because that means that it was kind of like the MCU of Hanna-Barbera, where all of the cartoons would show up, hang out, and like race each other. Scooby-Doo was just one of those cartoons that was always just playing, and you know enough about it to know what's going on. You already know what the formula is, so it's an easy watch. I mean, I feel like there's been like a resurgence, if you will, with Scooby-Doo. Like, people are dressing up as them, and you know, that's always a fun time, but I just never got into it as much as those wonderful fans. But it was definitely something that I grew up with.
Yeah. And then, David, what is your history with Scooby?
I watched a lot of Scooby-Doo cartoons as a kid. I remember specifically waking up as sort of a incentive to get up early, to get ready for school early. We would watch whatever's on Cartoon Network in the morning, and I remember Scooby-Doo was always playing, like always what was on TV at that time. So I remember watching a ton of like classic Scooby-Doo cartoons. I can't say it was like something that I had a particular like love of, but I definitely know and love the characters, and like really got used to the style of humor and the style of animation and everything like that. It's funny because it's one of those things that I feel like Scooby-Doo has like never really waned. I feel like it's just been a constant presence, that there was always some Scooby-Doo something somewhere. I don't know if there's anybody who's like a massive Scooby-Doo fan, anybody who like will deck out their car like the Mystery Machine or something, but I feel like it's that kind of a thing that just everybody knows Scooby-Doo. Everybody kind of likes Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
There was definitely a time where I thought Velma and Daphne, their names were switched, because I thought that the letter V was such a seductive letter. So I thought Velma was the one in purple with that like little sassy pose, and Daphne was just like, I'm a nerd, you know. Turns out already I was educated at a young age that I shouldn't assume things. So that's great.
I believe that I have a very similar history with you two as well, where Cartoon Network was a big part of my viewing diet. There's the Disney Channel, there was Nickelodeon, and there was Cartoon Network, which all three of them were just like right in a row. So whenever there was a program I didn't like, I would just go to the next one. And Scooby-Doo reruns were always in syndication on Cartoon Network. And actually, I do explain why that happened in the history of Scooby-Doo. But the show that really got me, and I think it was just because of the age I was a pup named Scooby-Doo. And I absolutely loved that show. I think it was just the wacky humor. I think part of it was just that I was into like Tiny Toons. It has that bouncy animation to it.
Did you like Muppet Babies?
I did like Muppet Babies, yeah.
So you just like baby cartoons.
Yeah. It was targeted towards children, but then when you watch them as adults or they're grown older, you're just like, oh, this is eventually what they turn into. And it kind of feels like, am I allowed to watch adult cartoons? Because it feels like an adult cartoon, like it's scarier, and you feel like this is this taboo almost, and you're just like, oh, I am allowed to watch this. This is really cool. And you just get sucked in that way. So I think that's why I was drawn towards Scooby-Doo. And David, like you mentioned, it's not anything that I absolutely love. I kind of think of it as Where's Waldo? Or if you're listening to this internationally, Where's Wally? You think of it as one of those books where no one like loves Waldo or those books. But when you see someone at a Halloween party dressed up as Waldo, and you're just like, oh, yes. And you would probably feel the same way when you see someone dressed up as Shaggy, Scooby, or like any of the gang. And you're just like, I love this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I dressed up as Shaggy for Halloween one year.
Oh, nice.
Because it was the easiest thing that I could put together at a last minute.
It is a very simple costume, yeah.
I once saw Waldo, not the Waldo, nobody can find him. But like in every Halloween, whenever I do see a Waldo/Wally, I go, oh my gosh, I found you. And their faces light up.
Yeah.
So I think that's like one of the best parts about it. Yeah, with the Mystery Team, that's what they're called?
Mystery Inc.
The Mystery Inc. Sorry. I'm mixing up Donald Glover.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just because of how colorful they all are and they wear the same outfits all the time. It's like, it's hard not to get excited when something so iconic is in front of you. So,
Yeah. Each character, if you put them in a silhouette, you'll know exactly who they are.
yeah.
Llegaron los ahorros de primavera a The Home Depot. ¿Y tú, en qué estás trabajando? Ya sea en tu patio, jardín o garage, el sistema de batería Ryobi One Plus le da potencia a más de 300 herramientas inalámbricas con un solo clic. Como a la sopladora o recortadora de cuerda Ryobi de 18 voltios, ahora a un nuevo precio más bajo de $129. Arranca todos tus proyectos con un clic, solo en The Home Depot. Haces más, logras más.
So let's start diving into the history of Scooby-Doo and kind of where it all came from. And we're going to start back in 1968 with the Action for Children's Television, also known as ACT. It was a parent-run organization founded by Peggy Charon. The group's first concern was the show Romper Room. It was a kids' show that would show off new toys, usually toys that were produced by sponsors of the show. Now, ACT found that it was simply made to sell products to kids, which they thought was unethical and should be taken off the air. But it soon turned its focus to the violence that was seen in children's Saturday morning cartoons. Through their efforts, they pressured U.S. Congress and the FCC to help remove other shows such as The Herculoids, Space Ghost, Birdman and the Galaxy Trio, Super President, and Fantastic Four by 1969. Obviously, this left a huge gap in the Saturday morning children's program lineup, and that would be replaced with shows like HR Pufnstuf, Dastardly, Muttley and their Flying Machines, and of course, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?
I just gotta say, it's very funny to me that this like parent action group started as a way to combat the blatant advertising in children's media, and then quickly just becomes something that is much less. Violence in children's media is far less of a problem, but that always seems to happen with things like this.
I wanted to dive into it because when it was first mentioned in the article I was reading, it really made them look like the bad guys. And I was like, I'm sure that they started off good. The first thing that they started off with was they railed against capitalism. And it was like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So like they had good intentions and then suddenly...
And specifically, advertising to children is especially kind of gross.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then they quickly turn to like playing the records backwards and hearing hidden lyrics. And you're just like, oh, like you took a turn pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So the executive for daytime programming at CBS, Fred Silverman, was in a bind trying to rebuild the Saturday morning lineup while trying to please these watch groups. Actually, some of the members of ACT served as advisors for various animation studios so that inappropriate cartoons and ideas would be stopped before they could be produced. Silverman found a program that could be both entertaining and would pass the ACT standards with The Archie Show, the show based on the Archie comics.
Archie's here, Betty's here, Veronica too, Reggie's here. Hey Jughead, where are you?
In the show, the fictional band The Archies performed a song, Sugar Sugar.
And now, the Riverdale Carnival presents The Archies.
Take care of the kissing booth while we're singing, Sabrina.
Okay, everybody, here we go with our new hit record, Sugar, Sugar!
Which became so popular that it reached number 1 in the Billboard charts in 1969.
It's a good song.
I didn't know that it was a fictional band that made it. I thought it was like an actual band in the 70s.
Same.
Yeah.
Now I love it even more.
Building upon the successful formula, Silverman contacted producers William Hanna and Joseph Barbera to create another cartoon that would center around a teen rock band with the twist that they would solve mysteries between gigs.
That's why they're dressed like that.
Hanna and Barbera were best known for creating the show Tom and Jerry when they worked for MGM Studios in the 40s and 50s. They would later start their own studio, Hanna-Barbera Cartoons Incorporated, in 1957. Their studio first produced the programs The Rough and Ready Show, The Huckleberry Hound Show, and The Quick Draw McGraw Show. But their major success is when they came out and made The Flintstones, which was the first primetime series with a 30-minute sitcom format in the history of television. They went on to create other memorable shows like The Yogi Bear Show, Top Cat, The Jetsons, The Magilla Gorilla Show, Johnny Quest, The Peter Potamus Show, Space Ghost and Dino Boy, Birdman and the Galaxy Trio, The Herculoids, Fantastic Four, before they were given the new assignment from Fred Silverman, a show that would rival The Archie Show. That show was actually produced by Filmation. That was not done by Hanna-Barbera. William Hanna assigned the show, at first called House of Mysteries, to writers Joe Ruby and Ken Spears and the character designer Owayo Takamoto. The initial idea featured 5 teenagers, Jeff, Mike, Kelly, Linda, and Linda's brother, WW, along with their bongo-playing dog named Too Much. Yes, the dog's name is Too Much.
That's too much, man.
Between shows, they were solving supernatural mysteries involving ghosts, zombies, and other creatures. This was influenced by the radio drama I Love a Mystery. As for the design for Too Much, the dog, they couldn't design if it was going to be a large, cowardly dog or a small, feisty one. They went with a large, cowardly Great Dane at first, but switched the character to a sheepdog instead before presenting it to the studio because it felt too similar to another cartoon dog, Marmaduke. The problem with the sheepdog, though, is that the Archie show, their dog, Hot Dog, was also a sheepdog, so they had to scrap that idea. Silverman, he initially rejected this pitch, but he did like the idea of a large, cowardly Great Dane. Takamoto consulted with another employee at Hanna-Barbera who was a breeder of Great Danes and was able to study their look and behavior. He designed Too Much to have severely bowed legs, a double chin, and a sloped back, and other small abnormalities. For Ruby and Spears, instead of modeling knockoffs of the Archies, they instead made knockoffs of the characters from the show The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis.
Is she blonde? Is she tall? Is she dark? Is she small? Is she any kind of dreamboat at all? No matter, he's hers and hers are all. Dobie!
Which actually starred Bob Denver, who you might know as Gilligan from Gilligan's Island. This brought the head count of teenagers from 5 to 4. Jeff was renamed to Ronnie, Kelly was renamed to Daphne, Linda was then renamed to Velma, and WW was given a more hippie-style name, Shaggy. Now, Shaggy was based on the character Maynard G. Krebs, who was played by Bob Denver, so essentially Gilligan and Shaggy are the same person.
Oh my goodness.
Roast beef? You run out of liverwurst, huh?
Charlie, why can't you be more like Crab?
I'm so scared. I wish I had a ham sandwich to calm my nerves. Well, what do you know? A ham sandwich.
When they pitched the revised version of Mysteries 5 to Fred Silverman, he liked most of their ideas. He did insist that Ronnie be named Fred instead. I'm guessing because he wanted a character named after himself.
Amazing.
Silverman was then tasked to present the show to CBS executives under the new title, Who's Scared? For CBS president Frank Stanton, he thought the artwork was too scary for young viewers and declined to greenlight the show. So the team at Hanna-Barbera regrouped and had to revise their treatment. They had to tone down the scary elements and emphasize the comedy. They got rid of the rock band so you could focus more on the dynamic between Too Much and Shaggy. According to Ruby and Spears, Silverman, during one of their development meetings, came up with a new name for their dog, Scooby-Doo. Silverman was inspired by taking a red-eye flight and listening to Frank Sinatra's Stranger in the Night. There was one moment in the song where Sinatra sings, and just like that, the name Scooby-Doo was born. Now, coincidentally, the Archies, they came out with a song called Feelin' So Good, Scooby-Doo, which came out in 1968. My suspicion is that he did not want to admit that he was listening to the Archies when he came up with the name for Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo is also like such a good dog name. Any dog owner will tell you that no matter what you name your dog, you're just going to end up like morphing it into just random sounds. Just Scooby-Doo is just fun to say, and it's a great dog name.
You can extend it, you can shorten it, so like you can go with the full-on Scooby-Dooby-Doo, Scoobert-Doo. You can call him Scooby or Scoobs. Like, it's a fun name to say, and like it's so flexible.
I would even believe that his name was actually Reginald Martin or something. As a dog owner, you just end up thinking of nicknames that have nothing to do with the original name. Like, we call both of our dogs Bups with a B, so because it makes sense. I also just love that they ran out of dogs. They were just like, well, we already have a Great Dane. Let's get like a shepherd. Oh, we can't. Those are the only dogs that we can think of. They couldn't do Dalmatians, of course, for good reason, but there are just many dogs and they just chose not to look.
I mean, the thing is with animation is that you are drawing this character hundreds, if not thousands of times, and you have to think of like what's a distinct style, but also how to keep it simple at the same time. And if you're doing something like a Dalmatian, you have to keep track of spots.
Oh.
Which sounds like an absolute nightmare to deal with.
Yeah. The fact that they did it 101 times is just...
So Silverman and the Hanna-Barbera team repitched the show, now titled Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Which is a confusing title because the punctuation is an exclamation mark, not a question mark. But CBS decided to approve, and they got 17 episodes, which would be part of the 1969 to 1970s season in the Saturday morning cartoon block. The first episode, What a Night for a Night, as in K-N-I-G-H-T, premiered on Saturday, September 13th, 1969 at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. For Hanna-Barbera, they were worried because Filmation, their rivals in the same studio that made the Archies, they premiered their mystery show a week earlier, The Hardy Boys. And they were afraid because they had the name recognition. Scooby-Doo did not. Luckily for them, the show was a hit, and they were given a second season and 8 more episodes. Something to note is the theme song, which was written by Austin Roberts. Where are you? We got some work to do now. This theme song was actually introduced in the second season, and the first season actually had a lyricless song, which you can kind of hear as background music in a few episodes.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
When the show went into syndication and home release, the Austin Roberts theme song then replaced the original theme, which is why you always see that whenever you watch reruns.
Interesting.
Oh.
To voice Scoobert-Doo was Don Masek, who has many voices over at Hanna-Barbera, including Bam Bam from the Flintstones, Dr. Benson Quest in Johnny Quest, Mr. Peebles in Magilla Gorilla, Blip, Bronto, and Zorak for Space Ghost, Astro in the Jetsons, so he's played 2 dogs, and he would later voice our favorite, Scrappy-Doo.
Oh.
That's just scratching the surface of the characters that he voiced. Mesa continued.
Llegaron los ahorros de primavera a The Home Depot. ¿Y tú, en qué estás trabajando? Ya sea en tu patio, jardín o garage, el sistema de batería Ryobi One Plus le da potencia a más de 300 herramientas inalámbricas con un solo clic. Como a la sopladora o recortadora de cuerda Ryobi de 18 voltios, ahora a un nuevo precio más bajo de $129. Arranca todos tus proyectos con un clic, solo en The Home Depot. Haces más, logras más.
to voice Scooby for the rest of his life. The last credit from him voicing Scooby was in 1995 for the Scooby-Doo mystery video game, 2 years just before his death. Scooby was then taken over by Frank Weckler, who was also the voice of Fred Jones, who is actually still voicing this character to this day.
What?
Yeah. He's been providing his voice for Transformers, from the animated show in the 80s to the movies that we actually see now. He is best known for voicing the character Megatron. He has also been involved in the Flintstones, voicing Bam Bam's father, Barney Rubble.
Very different.
The other voice actor that hung onto his character for a lifetime was Casey Kasem, who played Norville Shaggy Rogers. And after passing away in 2014, the voice of Shaggy has been taken over by Matthew Lillard, who portrayed Shaggy in the live-action Scooby-Doo film, which we will be going over later.
Yeah, when we were watching it last night, I was just IMDbing everybody, as one does.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just like, oh, wow, Matthew Lillard has continued to voice Shaggy in everything after this movie. That's kind of amazing.
He was the perfect casting, in real life and then in voice. Yeah.
Casey Kasem was actually a very big name in the Philippines because his son, Mike Kasem, became a video DJ, meaning a VJ, for, I believe it was, I forget if it was for MTV or VH1. It had to be MTV. And so that was like the big thing. Like every time he was like, hey, I'm Mike Kasem, me and my brothers would just go, oh, did you know his dad was Casey Kasem, who was the voice of Shaggy? Like, that was like our favorite fun fact for some reason. Interesting to hear that name again.
To voice Daphne Blake was Stefania Christofferson, who was only there for one season before she got married and moved to New York. She then was preceded by Heather North, previously known as Ellen in the film Git. She was another lifetimer, voicing Daphne until 2012. Heather North was pretty lucky to get the role because she was recommended by Nicole Jaffe, who was the voice of Velma Dinkley and was Heather's roommate at the time.
Perfect.
She also hung on to the role and has been co-voicing the character up until 2012. I mentioned co-voicing because Velma was also portrayed by MASH regular Patricia Stevens. The show's formula was mostly established from the start. The gang would arrive via the Mystery Machine to a new location that is purportedly being terrorized by some sort of supernatural phenomenon or monster. Fred is the one that announces that there is a mystery afoot and they need to begin investigating.
First thing we'd better do is split up and search the school for clues.
We get more context when they question the locals and business owners. The gang splits up to look for clues, sneaking into the haunted properties at night, with Shaggy and Scooby being given a Scooby snack as an incentive to help investigations.
Come on, Scooby, you're not chicken.
Would you come with us for a Scooby snack?
Who?
Okay, 2 it is.
Well, come on.
Daphne, most of the time, will get captured or kidnapped. Usually, Scooby and Shaggy find the monster while in search for food, which leads to a comedic chase. Another clue is discovered, usually by Velma, that gives credibility to the idea that this is not a paranormal activity.
This map is just the clue we needed.
A Rube Goldberg-like trap is set up to catch the monster. Shaggy and Scooby are usually used as bait. The villain is caught and unmasked to reveal that it is a disgruntled character that we were introduced to in the beginning of the episode. The gang provides evidence to the arresting officer, and the villain will spout off the phrase,
We would have gotten away with it if it hadn't been for you meddling kids.
And Hanna-Barbera had a hit. And they had a winning formula, which then began a bunch of other mystery-centered shows such as Josie and the Pussycats, The Funky Phantom, the poorly named The Amazing Chan and the Chan Clan, Speedy Buggy, Goober and the Ghost Chasers, and Jabberjaw, and the Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels. So if it wasn't for Scooby-Doo, we would not have the greatest movie of all time, Josie and the Pussycats. In 1972, Hanna-Barbera reformatted the show from a 30-minute program to an hour-long format and retitled it to the confusing The New Scooby-Doo Movies. Even though it still premiered on CBS as a Saturday morning cartoon, this is where we start seeing guest stars both real and fictional, join in the gang to solve their mysteries. Oftentimes, the guest star would be voiced by the actual person, and fictional characters would be pulled from the library of Hanna-Barbera characters.
Llegaron los ahorros de primavera a The Home Depot. ¿Y tú, en qué estás trabajando? Ya sea en tu patio, jardín o garage, el sistema de batería Ryobi One Plus le da potencia a más de 300 herramientas inalámbricas con un solo clic. Como a la sopladora o recortadora de cuerda Ryobi de 18 voltios, ahora a un nuevo precio más bajo de $129. Arranca todos tus proyectos con un clic, solo en The Home Depot. Haces más, logras más.
Available to them. The gang's first guest in Ghastly Ghost Town. Can I have you guys guess who do you think their first guest was?
Was this their one with Kiss?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, I was more familiar with the Flintstones with Michael Jack Stone and Stoney Curtis and Anne Margrock.
I'll give you a hint. It's a trio.
It's a trio. Okay.
The Three Stooges.
Yes.
Oh!
Yeah, Larry, Moe, and Curly were the first guests to join the Scooby-Doo gang.
I'm gonna disappear too! Me too!
For obvious reasons, they had to imitate their voices with voice actors. Their next episode, The Dynamic Scooby-Doo Affair. That is when they are joined by Batman and Robin. Although not voiced by Adam West and Burt Ward, the superheroes were voiced by actors that actually portrayed them in Super Friends. There was Ole Soul and Casey Kasem, which is very convenient because Casey was already there to voice Shaggy. Other guests throughout the series include the Addams Family, Jonathan Winters, Don Knotts, Phyllis Diller, Sandy Duncan, Sonny and Cher, Laurel and Hardy, the Harlem Globetrotters, Davy Jones, Jerry Reed, Josie and the Pussycats, the cast of Genie, which was an animated show based on I Dream of Jeannie, Tim Conway, Don Adams, the cast of Speed Buggy, Cass Elliot, and of course, Dick Van Dyke.
And the band Kiss.
Kiss didn't actually show up in the original one, so they have a movie.
Oh, the original one. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, I just looked it up.
Yeah, I know they have a movie together.
Yep, I just looked it up. That wasn't until 2015. Okay, I was way off.
Yeah, it's way, way later. The series lasted until 1973, after which CBS would discontinue the show and reruns of the original Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Series. That series then expired in 1976. In 1975, Fred Silverman, he actually left CBS to be the president of ABC Entertainment.
And suddenly Fred's name was changed back to Ronnie.
In which he actually helped save Happy Days from being canceled and actually helped generate the spinoff Laverne and Shirley.
Oh.
During his time at ABC, he also greenlit Charlie's Angels, Donnie Marie, Three's Company, Eight is Enough, The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, Good Morning America, and Family Feud, just to name a few. Silverman wanted to bring Scooby-Doo to ABC, and the way to do so was by issuing 16 episodes of Dynomutt, Dog Wonder, with guest star Scooby-Doo, in which they titled it Scooby-Doo Dynomutt Hour.
He's fearless, scareless, a little too careless. Dynomutt! He's a go-go dog person.
That's me, Dog Wonder.
Which was followed by a rerun of Scooby-Doo Where Are You? In 1976. Joe Ruby and Ken Spears were hired to create 16 more episodes of Scooby-Doo Where Are You? That would premiere on ABC in 1978. This series introduced Scooby's dim-witted cousin, Scooby-Dum.
Oh, no. We've been following a bowling ball.
Yep, it's a bowling ball, all right.
So this is kind of weird. Whenever you look up the IMDb for Scooby-Doo Where Are You? There's like the first two episodes right next to each other, 1969, 1970. And then way later, it's like season 3 is like 1978. So they actually continued on the series, but they went from CBS for the first two and then ABC for the last one.
Wow.
There was an attempt to bring Scooby-Doo from their usual Saturday morning block to primetime with Scooby Goes Hollywood, an hour-long special that aired on ABC on December 13th, 1979.
He sure loved food.
That's never changed. But who would have thought Scooby would go Hollywood on us?
This would be the first time where we're introduced to a feisty little character named Scrappy-Doo.
Scrappy-Doo.
Scooby's cousin that was added to the gang for a 16-episode Saturday morning series called Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo in an attempt to boost ratings. And you know what? It worked. Scrappy-Doo was a hit. So story editor Dwayne Pohl, he noted, quote, Scrappy solved a lot of story problems. Before you had to get Shaggy and Scooby into dangerous situations, and there was no real easy way to get them there. With Scrappy, he just picked them up and carried them there. He just charged in. He was such the antithesis of what Scooby and Shaggy were. The dynamic was great fun to play with. Former writers and creators Joe Ruby and Ken Spears were not fond of the new edition. Part of it was due to the fact that they actually left Hanna-Barbera to start their own studio with very little success, and how unstable the Scooby-Doo franchise was, which led them to leaving in the first place. Focus on the franchise began shifting more towards Scrappy. In the 1980s, the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show was reduced to 7-minute shorts, and each episode would contain 3 shorts that filled the half-an-hour slot. Not only was the time reduced, but the cast was reduced as well, dropping the main characters Fred, Velma, and Daphne. The show's main characters were simply Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy. That's a lot of S's for main characters.
Yeah.
Even the number of paws Scrappy walked on was reduced to just 2 hind paws. What also was strange about the series is that many of the supernatural creatures they encountered weren't being unmasked or resolved, implying that paranormal activity might be real. The show lasted for about 3 seasons with a total of 33 episodes or 99 total shorts from 1980 to 1982. From September to December of 1982, the Scooby and Scrappy-Doo were now part of the Scooby and Scrappy-Doo Puppy Hour, a co-produced show with Hanna-Barbera Productions and Ruby Spears Enterprise. The show consisted of a 7-minute Scrappy and Yabba Doo episode, which was Scrappy's Western deputy uncle, then 2 7-minute Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo episodes, followed by a 30-minute episode of The Puppy's New Adventure. From 1980 to 1986, reruns of multiple iterations of Scooby-Doo continued to air on Saturday mornings, retitled Scooby-Doo Classics, Scary Scooby Funnies, The Best of Scooby-Doo, and Scooby's Mystery Funhouse. In 1983, the Scooby-Doo format began to morph back into its original form with the new Scooby and Scrappy-Doo show. And by the second season, it was renamed to The New Scooby-Doo Mysteries.
Woo! Scooby-Doo, where are you? Come on, Scooby, where you been? Trouble's on the loose again. Scooby, they're not gonna get you. Scooby-Doo. Scrappy's gonna help you.
The show was developed by Tom Rudger. This was the first time developing a show, whereas before he animated other spin-off animated series like Jane of the Jungle, Godzilla, The New Fred and Barney Show, Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, Casper and the Angels, and Super Friends. He would go on to be a writer for other animated shows like The Kid Superpower Hour with Shazam, Flash Gordon, The Gary Coleman Show, The Dukes, and He-Man, The Masters of the Universe, before he landed a gig to develop his own show. This version of Scooby-Doo would fall back to its original 30-minute format and would begin integrating the original cast members Fred, Velma, and Daphne. Tom Rudger continued with Scooby-Doo and created the 12-episode series, The 13 Ghosts of Scooby Doo, which came out in 1985.
The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo.
This series was the first time we see an overarching storyline throughout the series, and not just one-off standalone episodes. This is the series that introduced us to the characters Flim Flam and his warlock friend Vincent Van Ghoul, who is voiced by none other than Vincent Price.
Fortunately, no one but a complete fool would ever open that awful box.
This was also when Shaggy wears jeans and his famous red shirt. Daphne sports a eggplant-colored jumpsuit, and they drive a red 6-wheeled utility van. Although the series didn't unite the original cast, as Fred and Velma were missing from the show, this was explained away by stating that both of them were at summer camp. In the DC Comics Scooby-Doo team up, that states that this actually happened in an alternative universe. What made this series unique is that for the first time, the gang is hunting down actual paranormal activity, real ghosts and goblins. This show seems to be a response to Ghostbusters. The movie actually came out in 1984, so a year before The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo.
That makes sense.
But more specifically, Filmation's Ghostbusters animated series. Not to be confused with the real Ghostbusters, the animated series later made by Columbia Pictures. So the real was added to the title because there was a dispute between Filmation and the Ghostbusters property. Unfortunately, the series was canceled before it got a chance to conclude, capturing only 12 out of the 13 ghosts. The story wasn't concluded until 2019 with the straight-to-video film Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13th Ghost.
Like, I guess we've got some unfinished business after all.
Who is Vincent Van Ghoul?
What's a chest of demons?
And will you take a personal check?
No!
The film finally brings the full cast together, bringing back Velma and Fred and dropping Scrappy. The character Flim Flam was no longer a child, but is actually an 18-year-old adult. There seems to be a lot of inconsistencies between the series and the film. The big one being that they dismissed the existence of real ghosts and goblins. The inconsistencies seem to be because they wanted the film to fall more in line with What's New Scooby-Doo and not the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. Also, Flim Flam is now 18 years old, even though this series is supposed to take place maybe 10 months after the series The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. So somehow he went from being like 6 years old to 18 years old within those 10 months.
Paranormal baby.
Yes. That series lasted from December 1985, and then the reruns for it stopped in March of 1986. In 1988, the gang returned with a version that I am most familiar with growing up, a pup named Scooby-Doo, which was also developed by Tom Rudger. The show reimagined the gang as elementary school students, returning to their original storytelling format with a style inspired by Tex Avery, Looney Tunes, and Bob Clampett cartoons. This is also the series that shows Scooby's parents and reveal that his real name is Scoobert. They also established that the gang's hometown is Coolsville.
Yep.
The series was a success and ran for 4 seasons, the longest any Scooby-Doo show had ever run.
I don't know if I ever saw a pup named Scooby-Doo.
Really?
I don't know.
I mean, it was on Cartoon Network. You had to, like...
Yeah, I mean, maybe I've seen it. I don't have any memories of it, though.
I probably moved by that point. What year was that again?
Well, 88 is when it premiered, but I remember it on reruns. Like, that's the only way that I could watch it was through reruns.
Right, because 88, I was born, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that just never made it to the Philippines because I would have remembered that.
Huh. For Rudger, he would actually go on to make Tiny Toons Adventures, Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, and Freakazoid. From 1987 to 88, Hanna-Barbera made 10 made-for-TV films featuring the most popular shows and characters known as the Hanna-Barbera Superstars 10. 3 of those films were Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers, Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, and Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf. Throughout the 90s, what really kept Scooby-Doo relevant was their syndication and constant reruns, mostly on Cartoon Network. So from 1998, after Warner Brothers acquired Hanna-Barbera in the Time Warner Turner Entertainment merger in 1996, the studio was producing a new direct-to-video film every year, with the first being Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
We're going to New Orleans for our first segment, Haunts of Louisiana.
And New Orleans has some of the best food in the world. And the best ghosts.
These films would feature the original cast, although slightly aged up, and they would again encounter actual supernatural monsters. After the death of Hanna-Barbera Studios in 2001, WB Animation took over production of every Scooby-Doo from there on.
You know, I don't know if I like... Actually, you know what? I do know. I don't like them dealing with actual supernatural stuff. I feel like part of the fun of that original show for me was like... oh, here's all these crazy things, but look, we're going to explain it at the very end of this thing that looks supernatural. What was it really? And like, that was part of the charm of the story for me. We'll get into this more once we get into Scooby-Doo 2002. I just not as into the real supernatural stuff.
Yeah.
The whole point was that they had to solve a mystery.
Exactly.
And if it's just like, well, they're ghosts, it's like, well, then we can't solve anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat with you. Like, I like the supernatural stuff, but it felt like the idea of this is like they're solving a mystery. On the surface, looks spooky, supernatural, but is always explained away to just be like, just a man behind a mask. It's always going to be a man behind the mask.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you mess with that formula. That's such a big part of the episode. The reveal at the end, where it's just like, I knew it. I knew it was going to be that character that they talked to for maybe 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you look forward to. And you spend the whole episode guessing, like, would it be that character? Or like when they're interviewing someone, they're just like, he seems suspicious. I think it's going to go. I'm going to go with that one.
We were the meddling kids.
Exactly. Yeah.
We need to meddle.
Yeah. And that is taken away from you when it is a supernatural entity, like a real supernatural entity. Yeah.
Exactly.
So the Scooby-Doo franchise, it's been continuing. It's still going. Currently, there are 13 TV series, 46 variations of movies. There are 20 video games, 15 comic book series, and they have appeared in so many crossovers that's too hard to keep up with. I want to stop the history here because this is about the time that WB decides that Scooby and the gang are ready to go beyond animation and make a live action film. Mm-hmm. The idea of making a live action Scooby-Doo film dates back to 1994 with producer Charles Roven, whose best known film at the time was when he produced the Robin Williams dark comedy Cadillac Man. He'd go on to produce 12 Monkeys, the Dark Knight trilogy, many of the recent DC films, and he actually produced the Marvel What If series.
Oh.
He hired Craig Titley to write the first draft of the script, which he finished in 1996. The project sat in development hell, but by the end of the 90s, after WB acquired the property, the increased popularity of the show through reruns and the CG technology, the film seemed much more feasible. This is much like with Spider-Man in the 90s. Mm-hmm. The Scooby-Doo property was just so tied up in a lot of legal ownership. So Hanna-Barbera was actually sold to Turner Entertainment in 1991. Turner also created Cartoon Network. Cartoon Network was looking for programs just to put onto their network, which is why so much of Hanna-Barbera is like ingrained in us, because that was the only thing that they had available to them to like constantly rerun.
Yeah.
So then the merger happened with Warner, which then complicated things even more. But then they finally got it all together around like 1996. And then in July 1998, Variety reported that Frasier and Simpsons writer Jay Cogan and Mike Myers was working on a Scooby-Doo script, with Myers potentially portraying Shaggy.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, knowing how well he can do voices, I'm sure he could really pull it off.
Yeah.
By October 2000, the film was given the green light, with Raja Gosnell to direct. Recently, he directed Never Been Kissed. Mike Myers did drop out of the film, but Jay Cogan did stay on to help revise the script after it was originally written by Craig Titley, which was very different from the final film that we see, although Craig Titley did get a story credit for the movie. In Titley's film, it was supposed to serve as an origin story of how the gang met in school, and they were tasked with saving the world from Armageddon. Fred and Daphne would finally end up together. Scooby goes through an existential crisis over the fact that he's a dog. Shaggy got into a relationship with a girl named Candy, who coincidentally is the inventor of the Scooby snack.
Oh.
There's a cameo from Josie and the Pussycats, so they would have run into the band.
The live action band that we saw?
Yeah, the live action
Oh
band
my goodness.
would have run in to the live action Scooby-Doo gang.
Oh.
There was also like a short appearance of the Jetsons, but it was like Shaggy flipping through the television and then he sees the Jetsons playing on TV. But yeah, once the property then changed ownership to WB, Jay Cogan, he was given the task to do a page one rewrite.
I do like that the 2002, that Scooby-Doo 2002. I like that one is not a prequel, how they all got together like this original script was. I mean, I guess 2002, we weren't as sick of prequels, but prequels are kind of bland sometimes, especially with something like this. I don't need to know how the Mystery Inc. got together. They're just friends who solve mysteries.
Well, you have to consider that we are dealing with a lot of superhero movies that are coming out, and a lot of those were like origin stories. So we have Spider-Man, origin story of Spider-Man, the X-Men's origin story. We have Blade as well.
But those are all characters who it's like, we're making their origin story because those origins are specifically coming from already pre-written origins. There was never an origin for the Mystery Inc. in the cartoons, and I would argue there's no need for one. They're just Mystery Inc.
I disagree. I want to know how Fred got his ass caught.
Yeah.
And I want to know why Daphne is constantly doing that same pose. Like, did she like get into a fight with a bear and like lost a rib or something? So she has to hold on to her hip. Like, I need to know these things.
Once WB took over the property, then they're like, oh, now we got to do an origin story to like retcon everything. But yeah, no, I understand what you mean, David. It's like, we understand who these characters are. Kid gets bitten by the spider. We don't need to know anything more.
I need to know everything. It's important for fan fiction.
So lastly, the film was revised by this familiar name, James Gunn. Now, this is going to be the script that we're going to go over in this episode. Now, before we dive into the synopsis, there is a few things that we need to know. In 2017, James, on the 15th anniversary of the film, he revealed that this was going to be an R-rated version of Scooby-Doo, which is actually misleading. When he wrote the film, he approached it like it was the PG-13 Brady Bunch movie, and intended Scooby-Doo to actually have the same rating. Gunn is a filmmaker from Troma Entertainment, a studio founded by Lloyd Kaufman, and is known for stirring up controversy and working independently outside of the big studio bureaucracy. Most famously known for making Toxic Avenger, Class Nukem High, and Tromeo and Juliet, which was written by James Gunn. Now, according to Sarah Michelle Gellar, much of the film was actually changed to be more family-friendly after the cast signed on to the movie, and then it changed even further in post-production when WB decided to make this film into a PG-rated movie.
Boo.
And not the PG-13 rated film that they intended. According to James Gunn, the first MPAA rating was R, but it was only because of one stupid joke that the MPAA misinterpreted. So let's get into the synopsis now. Exterior, Spooky Island. A music festival takes place at this rundown tropical island theme park. We pass a haunted house with a sign that reads, "Welcome to Spooky Island, where fear is your friend." And it has a handful of letters that have fallen off because of the lack of maintenance. We approach a crowd of partying college students and land on Isabel, a goth girl not enjoying the party with her friend Mandy. They go on their own adventure when they enter through a staff-only door. In the dark hallway, they encounter a monster with red eyes. They run. Mandy is soon captured. Isabel runs and locks herself in a room where she finds a phone and calls her father. Her father's last name is revealed to be Rogers. She doesn't reach him and leaves a voicemail. She sees the room is covered in newspaper clippings of Scooby-Doo and the gang's solved mysteries. She whispers, "Scooby-Doo?" just before the monster bursts into the room. And then the Scooby-Doo theme song starts playing. During the credits montage, we show the rise and fall of Mystery Inc. through various TV appearances, including one on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. They appear on magazine covers. Scooby does a Scooby snack commercial, but the director can't get any good takes out of him because he doesn't understand Scooby at all. Through behind-the-music-like interviews, they begin subtly insulting each other and express their frustrations leading up to why they quit after 3 years together. We are at Shaggy's house. The place is in disrepair. The phone rings. Scooby answers. And on the end is Garrett Rogers, Shaggy's uncle. His daughter is in trouble and needs their help. Shaggy enters with the iconic line, "Scooby-Doo, where are you?" Multiple times, Scooby tries to hang up on Garrett after mentioning the demons. The phone rings again and Shaggy answers. Next, Shaggy and Scooby are now in Garrett Rogers' office, where it's revealed that he is a professor at Coolsville University. They listen to Isabel's voicemail, and Garrett reveals that 3 rebellious-looking students disappeared at Spooky Island last year, and when they returned, they came back with a conservative, clean-cut, forced smile type look, and now they have increased GPAs. Garrett is desperate, offering his life savings and vast amount of Scooby snacks for them to solve the mystery and get his daughter back. Shaggy tries to decline, stating that he didn't actually solve the mysteries and the gang is no longer together. At the 28th annual Coolsville Science Fiction Convention, we see Fred giving a presentation on his book ESP, Shmee SP, going through a slideshow of unmasked monsters, concluding that supernatural beings aren't real. He spots Scooby and Shaggy in the back of the auditorium. In a hotel room, Shaggy briefs Freddy on what's going on. Fred is in, incentivized that this would actually help improve his book sales. Next, we see Velma in a group therapy session expressing that she didn't receive the credit she deserved while being a part of Mystery Inc. As she walks to her car, the mystery machine pulls up with Fred, Shaggy, and Scooby. Velma is in, under the condition that she gets to do the interviews and not Fred. So this is about the time that you get to, like, when you watch the original movie, you start to see like what stayed in there and what was definitely cut out. So like the group therapy session, or even Fred doing the speech about his book, you start to see that like bleed into the film. But like the first scene was completely changed, which I absolutely adore that first scene. I thought it's so good.
I loved it.
Like there's a ghost right behind me, isn't there?
There are moments in here where I'm going to either put in lines and jokes that James Gunn put in there, which would actually push the rating to PG-13 and potentially R. Yes. So there is a statement said by Fred when Daphne says, I want to do the interviews, and he states saying, that's breaking tradition. That's like hanging turds on a Christmas tree. And then Scooby says, I read that once. And then Shaggy said, don't remind me, Scoob.
That's a PG-13 joke?
He said turds.
Yeah, turd.
Okay.
That's such a PG-13 thing to say.
Yeah. I guess I'm looking for things that like what's pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
Fred agrees to the conditions and Velma is in. The gang pulls up to a Tai Chi academy where Daphne is practicing her martial arts, defeating multiple students attempting to spar with her. The rest of the gang shows up and Daphne declines their offer. Velma states that she understands since she's always getting captured. Daphne is offended, stating that her body is a dangerous weapon, and now she is in. I think she actually says that line in the movie.
Yeah.
You are no longer helpless. Your body is a dangerous weapon.
The gang gets ready to fly out of Coolsville Airport, dressing up Scooby in drag to look like Daphne's grandma. Shaggy is successfully playing at a claw machine. Before they get on the plane, Fred tries to raise morale by putting their hands together and yelling woohoo. Various members are still mad at each other and decline, leaving Fred and Scooby woohoo-less.
Fred and Scooby instead of Shaggy and Scooby?
Yeah, Shaggy's.
Because Shaggy's the one who does it in the movie, in the version we saw.
Like, I reread it too, and I was like, they're not usually paired up with each other. But yeah, in the script it said Fred and Scooby are just left with their hands together.
I mean, it does make sense that Fred is the one who wants to keep the team together as well. Like,
yeah, and just Scooby is just happy no matter what.
That's what made it go into our rating, because it's unbelievable and nobody would appreciate that.
As they board the plane, Scooby growls at a hissing cat. His canine instincts are kicking in. Fred attempts to discipline Scooby by flicking him in the nose, only to be punched in the face in retaliation.
It's simple behavior modification. To cause a dog to discontinue any action, you simply flick it on the nose. Observe. Scoob. See?
The gang lands at Spooky Island Airport. They begin handing out photos of Isabel to see if anyone recognizes her, and they begin searching for a hypno wheel, a device potentially used to hypnotize victims. Shaggy shows the photos to Ngu Tuna, a large, friendly albino wearing a slick suit. He doesn't recognize Isabel, but he is enamored by Scooby. Ngu is a proprietor of the Scooby Island Hotel and offers to drive them via werewolf-themed golf cart around the island, which is surrounded by animatronic monsters, including the animatronic of a Frankenberry. Engu asks why they're visiting, and Fred states that he's here to disprove that there are no demons on this island. Fred mentions in there the books. He's saying, like, you might recognize me. Perhaps you know me from one of my books, The Bermuda Triangle, What Crap, or Bigfoot. Bullshit.
There's that R rating right there.
Yeah. There's also one moment where Daphne goes, oh my God, isn't that the cast of Friends? And it is indeed an animatronic cast of Friends eating a dog.
Oh!
Wow.
Ooh.
Yeah. Troma Productions.
Right?
I did want to include this. So this is actually a tweet from James Gunn years ago. And he actually said, on a side note, in my original script for Scooby-Doo, Spooky Island was a low-rent theme park cobbled together from cheap second-hand parts. And Mystery Inc. floated past an animatronic Frankenberry eating the cast of Friends. And then someone responded to him, someone famous that we are very well versed in. He actually said, actually, my favorite breakfast cereal was Frankenberry's Monster. David, can you guess who responded?
Oh, with Frankenberry's Monster?
Yes.
Dave Bautista.
Is it one of the people from Friends?
No.
Is it an actor?
It is a musician.
Dave Kroll.
Oh, okay. I was going to say Guillermo del Toro.
Mm-mm.
Weird Al.
It was Weird Al Yankovic who responded with, actually, my favorite breakfast cereal was Frankenberry's Monster. Engu and the gang pull up to a stone altar on a large stone platform with a large stone bowl in the center covered in carvings of demons. Mondrovius, the MC, welcomes the guests to Spooky Island and warns them not to stay out past midnight because of the demons. Next to him is Zarkos, a large ex-luchador who now acts as his bodyguard. Mondrovius begins a ritual with the natives, and out of the large bowl appears a demon goddess. Velma is quick to point out the holographic cameras. Fred informs the gang that they need to head to the castle. There is like a little Easter egg that they put in there, and they actually kept it in the movie, which I enjoyed. But it was the part where Shaggy says, like, we don't do castles.
Scoob and me don't do castles.
Why not?
Because castles have paintings with eyes that watch you and suits armor you think's a statue, but there's a guy inside who follows you every time you turn around.
How many times has that actually happened?
12. We're not gonna do it.
Referring to the 13 Ghosts series. Shaggy and Scooby are incentivized by food. They take off on 4 rented mopeds. Shaggy and Scooby obviously share a moped with Scooby driving. They reach the castle and ring the cheesy melody doorbell. There's a part where Fred says, a hypno wheel could be our biggest coup since we teamed up with the Harlem Globetrotters and opened a can of whoop-ass on Redbeard's ghost. After no one answers at the door, they enter through the unlocked door to the interior that doesn't match the outside. There's shag carpeting, flowered wallpaper. Fred suggests splitting up to look for clues, but is cut off by Daphne, who does not want to be paired off with Fred since she is still upset over their breakup. In fact, Daphne said, in this script, you cheated on me, Freddie, with every fan that you can get your hands on. You were like a lion with impalas, looking for ones that were wounded or too young to know any better.
Oh! Glad that was cut.
Yeah. Daphne joins Shaggy and Scooby. Velma stays with Fred. Daphne finds a bookshelf and pulls on the book, Men Are From Mars and I'm From Hell. Sure enough, the book spins the bookshelf around, leaving Daphne alone in a tiny room with ancient Latin text placed on a lectern. It's the demon Ritus. Velma suggests to Fred that they should split up, stating that she's ugly. Fred insists that's not the case as to why he didn't want to be paired off with her. In a poorly worded compliment, he states, stocky chicks turn me on every now and again, which I know they changed for the final film.
Yep.
And it's still pretty bad.
Yeah.
Look, I'm a man of substance. Dorky chicks like you turn me on too.
They pass by an Anne Geddes framed photo with eyes of the Cabbage Baby following them. Scooby and Shaggy find the kitchen and eat a comically large amount of food. Shaggy burps, which leads to them doing a burping competition, which then escalates to a farting competition that Daphne walks in on.
Just brilliant comedy here.
Yeah,
I'm glad they kept that in.
Right. Yeah, me and David were just like, this is an Academy Award winning movie.
Daphne shows them the book, and inside is an illustration of a demon eating a baby's head. Shaggy and Scooby agree that this would make a great t-shirt. Mondrovius and Zarkos enter the castle. They pass by 3 large vases that Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne are hiding inside of. Mon and Zar see the kitchen is a mess, and the book has the highlighted pages torn out of them. Mondrovius says, "Why didn't you stop them?" And Zarkos says, "I did. They just didn't know it yet." The gang escapes to the hotel, except for Scooby and Shaggy, whose tank has been punctured, leaving them stranded in the woods, forcing them to walk the rest of the way. At the hotel, Velma waits at the bar for Scooby and Shaggy. She is asked by someone if she knows the mystery gang since she was hanging out around them, not knowing that she is actually part of the group, which only frustrates her more. She orders a Coke, but is unaware that it was spiked by one of the partying college students. Fred and Daphne discuss what she found in her hotel room. Fred tries to enter, but Daphne stops him. Fred saying, "We have a long history." And Daphne going, "So do Godzilla and King Kong, but that doesn't mean that they should have sex." And Fred goes, "But we fit like Legos." Daphne reveals that she knew the monsters were fake and that getting captured was a way to get Fred's attention so that he could save her. Stating, "He had cheddar cheese for head. I let him capture me so that you could save me. Oh, help, help, give me a break. I'll tell you, that was not the only thing that I faked."
Oh, I love that. That should have stayed in.
"But I'm over the codependent damsel in distress crap. All right, I don't want you, I don't like you, and that ascot, it makes you look gay."
Oh.
She slams the door in his face afterwards.
We were rooting for you, Daphne.
Yes. Shaggy and Scooby are still walking through the woods. Shaggy suspects it's past midnight. Scooby gets distracted by a frog and separates from Shaggy. Shaggy spots a pair of flaming eyes that seem to be getting closer, and he runs, passes by Scooby, who joins him. They narrowly make it to the Holiday Inn and face a crowd of partying students and a very drunk Velma. Shaggy and Scooby fashion together a giant crossbow using the strings of a baby grand piano and a halogen lamp that was going to be used as an arrow. Fred enters into the lobby thinking the demon was slamming on the door and making all the noise, only to learn that it was Shaggy and Scooby out past midnight and there was no threat whatsoever, in which Fred tells Scooby, "Man, this is the most embarrassing thing you've done since you decided to clean your crotch at Don Knotts' Christmas party. Not that I was envious of your elasticity."
What in the world? These jokes are starting to go into absurd areas.
James Gunn, especially at this time, is kind of an edgelord.
He is.
This is edgelord James Gunn.
This is definitely we got that edgy comedy.
This is what he apologized on Twitter for. It was just
exactly.
the script.
Now, when he mentioned that there was one joke that put it over the edge, I believe it was this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like somebody saying, "Oh, I wish I could blow myself like you."
Exactly. Yeah.
Jeez.
While Fred explains that monsters aren't real, a 12-foot demon smashes through the windows, eyes flaming. From its appearance, it's hard to write off that this is just a man in a costume. The demon picks up Fred and throws him across and hitting the wall, knocking him out. Another demon breaks down the door, debris knocking down Velma, losing her glasses. The college students flee the hotel lobby. 5 more demons appear from behind the bar, knocking out students physically or with a green gas and tossing them away. Velma is handed her glasses from a demon who proceeds to knock her out with green gas. Scooby rummages through some luggage to find some Scooby snacks that he was promised to him earlier and then runs off with it. Shaggy goes to Daphne's room to warn her, but the demons have followed them, proceeding to attack. Daphne is knocked out, but Shaggy is able to snag her before she's taken away. Scooby runs into Shaggy and the unconscious Daphne, who then proceed to run down the hallway from a horde of demons and jump out the window at the end of the hall. They land safely into a pool, but the demons miss and they end up hitting the pavement. Now Daphne is awake, and the Scooby snacks are unfortunately ruined by the pool.
Oh.
The three hide behind a huge boulder and notice demons taking students away, giving them time to figure out a plan to defeat the demons and save Fred and Velma. The next morning, they meet with Lieutenant Emilio Raimundo and Officer Fitzgibbon. They tell them about the demons terrorizing the hotel, only to notice that the hotel is now in perfect condition, like nothing happened. The students that were taken now emerge from the hotel, hypnotically clean cut. Engu approaches the officers and explain away the incident as a monster show, and that Fred and Velma are at the Dead Mike's bar. At Dead Mike's, Fred, now with shorter hair and ascotless, and Velma, who has her hair in a bun, is wearing makeup and is in a sundress. They are both singing karaoke together, more specifically, Spandau's ballad True. Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne are shocked at what they are seeing. At the bar, Shaggy finds his clean-cut, brainwashed cousin Isabel. In the bathroom, Daphne is captured by Zarkos, the ex-luchador. Shaggy is still trying to convince the officer that there is something wrong with the island. The officers are fed up with Shaggy, threatening to put Scooby to sleep if they don't leave him alone.
Wow.
Yeah. Scooby actually responds with, "I'm not tired." And Shaggy goes, "Sleep, Scoob, like what happened to Scrappy."
Oh, jeez, they
wow.
killed him. Oh, wow.
Yeah. The officers leave. Shaggy and Scooby re-enter the bar, which is far spookier now, and find Fred, Velma, Isabel, and other students simultaneously eating a cereal at a table. Suddenly, their eyes turn red. Velma screeches, and Fred starts chanting in Latin. Shaggy and Scooby run. Scooby is cornered at the edge of a cliff until Shaggy, with a phone cord wrapped around his waist, grabs Scooby and jumps off the cliff. The cord is super strong and they're safe until Fred starts pulling them back up. Shaggy then cuts the cord and they both fall into the ocean. On shore, Shaggy and Scooby argue, causing Scooby to run into the forest. On the beach, Shaggy discovers metal cables that lead into a cavern. He enters a hallway similar to the halls in the beginning of the movie. Suddenly he falls into a gushing stream that empties out into a pool in the center of a cavern. He surfaces to find the officers that he was talking to earlier and a handful of students strapped down with a demon next to them. Using a soul snatcher, their souls are extracted through their chest. The demon squeezes itself into the officer's mouth, taking over his body, leaving him in a zombified state like the others. The souls are now put into a large iron vat, making a soul stew. Meanwhile, in the forest, Scooby runs into Daphne. Shaggy waits until the coast is clear to peer into the vat. Velma's soul convinces Shaggy to pull her out, along with the rest of the gang. Shaggy lets go of her soul, and she darts out of the cavern. When we cut back to Scooby, he is tied to a stick, being carried by a possessed Velma, Daphne, Isabel, and Mandy. Velma's soul re-enters her body, forcing the demon out, and when the demon hits the sunlight, it explodes. Luckily, no one notices. Shaggy continues to look for other souls and picks out a random man's soul. And honestly, I think this is the best joke in the movie, where he pulls out his soul and he's like, "Oh,
Thank you so much. You saved me. Thank you. Sorry, I'm looking for my friends.
and puts him right back into the vat."
Yeah, I agree. That's probably the best joke in the movie.
Shaggy finds Fred, and even as a bodiless soul, he still doesn't believe in the supernatural, thinking that his drink got spiked with crack. That's what it says in the script. I know in the movie it says, like, I think my drink got spiked, which I don't remember him drinking anything, but yeah, sure. Fred's soul is released, but is unable to enter his body, which is currently taking a shower. Shaggy pulls Daphne's soul out, and she is pissed because she has to be saved again. Scooby is now being led into the hallway where we were at in the beginning. Velma notices a soul, and she pulls Daphne's possessed body into an empty room. The soul enters and a demon pops out. Velma destroys it by turning on the light. Velma has figured out that the demons can't survive in the light and needs a body to protect them from it. Daphne is a bit off because it's not Daphne. It's Fred's soul in Daphne's body.
Yep.
In which Daphne proceeds to say, I can look at myself naked. Holy God, I can try things out I never imagined in even most outlandish fantasies.
Oh, jeez. I mean, the joke in the movie was already bad.
Yeah.
And should have been cut along with the rest of that.
Yep.
By the rest of that, Alexa, do you mean the rest of the movie?
Yes, absolutely.
They didn't linger on this as much as they did in the final film because soon after, Daphne's soul then enters into her body, forcing Fred out. And then Fred is now able to enter into his real body. Daphne says, he was in my body? Did he touch anything? Which Velma responds with, just your boobies a little bit. And then in the description, it says, Daphne does her best to pretend she's aghast. But obviously, she's a little turned on.
Oh,
Yikes.
God.
Zarkos returns to the cavern before Shaggy gets a chance to find Isabel's soul, and he tiptoes away. Scooby is now in a dungeon before he is led to Mondrovius. Shaggy steps out of the cavern to find Fred, Velma, and Daphne. He asks where Scooby is, but they don't have the heart to tell him the bad news. They set up camp on the beach and go over the pages that Daphne stole for the demon Ritus. Scooby is led into the office with the walls covered in news clippings of Scooby and the gang to meet Mondrovius. Mondo shows Scooby a miniature model of the cavern, the one with the soul stew. He then reveals that the vat is a portal that is used to summon low-level demons, but they've gathered enough souls to finally summon the demon Rex, which will happen at midnight, and all the souls on Earth will be replaced with demon souls. Velma, while reading the Latin text, is actually discovering the same plan. This plan cannot be conducted unless they have a Magna Canis, or the Great Canine. The gang turns the page to an illustration of a muscular version of Scooby. Scooby is the chosen one that needs to be sacrificed. Shaggy storms off to save Scooby, but the rest of the gang doesn't want to, claiming that their specialty is nut jobs and Halloween costumes and not actual demons. The gang is eventually convinced, and this time it's Velma that suggests that they should set up a trap. They set out to find a giant spotlight, a bunch of mirrors, and get a key to the control station. The gang all put their hands together, with Velma saying, and I know they say this in the movie,
Let's get jinky with it.
Later that night, Scooby is being pampered just before his sacrifice. Fred and Velma, wearing backpacks, act like demons and bring Shaggy to the cavern like he's a prisoner. Daphne positions herself at the top of the cavern, also wearing a backpack and sporting her leather eggplant bodysuit. Shaggy is bound and ready to get his soul sucked out of him. Just before they begin, Fred and Velma reveal their giant high-powered flashlights and destroy the demons. Once the demons are gone, they begin positioning the mirrors in the cavern. Shaggy is sent to the makeover parlor where he runs into Raimundo, who believes Shaggy is possessed and walks out clean cut. Shaggy spots Scooby and tries to talk to him, but Scooby is still mad at Shaggy. Scooby is happy where he is, the demons treat him with respect, and proudly states that he's a sacrifice, not really knowing what that word means. Shaggy doesn't convince him, but he does notice the luchador with a key that he needs to operate the soul-sucking machine, and asks Scooby that if he can get the key for him and hide it under the mattress. At the cavern, the mirrors are set up and they're ready to go. There's a line that Fred says, "If this works, it could be even cooler than the time we kicked the living shit out of Dick Van Dyke with the cotton candy ghost," in which Velma responds with, "You mean the time we kicked the shit out of the cotton candy ghost with Dick Van Dyke?" A horn echoes through the cavern, 15 minutes till midnight. The cavern fills with possessed humans, along with Shaggy and Fred, with Velma joining them. Daphne is on the top of the cavern with a giant spotlight ready to go. In various locations around the world, possessed humans are standing completely still, holding a talisman, waiting for the ritual to begin. Shaggy warns the gang not to sweat. That's what he found out when he was in the parlor, is that possessed humans don't sweat. Shaggy spots the key he needs on Zarkos, but trusts that Scooby got the key for him. Scooby is reminiscing, thinking back when Velma and Shaggy called him a moron, when Mondrovius said he was the chosen one, but lastly, when Shaggy apologized and said that he was his best friend. Zarkos begins the ritual. Mondrovius is in the control station. The crowd chants in unison, including those around the world. Shaggy, Velma, and Fred try to fake it. Scooby is in position above the soul stew. He's still enjoying the attention though. The possessed humans repeat, "The demon world forever be." Then they all start to screech all at once. Scooby now realizes that he's in trouble. The talismans that are around the world, they begin to explode. A hole in the ceiling explodes, causing the spotlight to topple over. The soul stew turns into a swirling vortex of screaming souls that grows taller, through the hole and then into the sky. A cavity opens up, and that's when we see the beast, the demon Rex. A large winged beast, black eyes deep set, deathly talons, a thin tongue slithering out of its steely, sharp beak. A horde of demons make up its tail. Velma pokes at Fred, asking him if he thinks that this is a man in a mask. Fred's worldview is completely changed at this moment.
That is another weird thing that is missing from the version we actually got, because it's like, hey, we're dealing with actual supernatural stuff, and they just don't ever address, like, I'm glad that this script actually takes a moment to address that and makes it a part of the story.
Yeah, because I feel like it needs to be like one or the other. You're dealing with demons or you're not. And obviously you are.
Going back to how they originally was, the whole thing was that supernatural things aren't real. It's all a man in a mask. It's all trickery. And that's even somewhat of a part of the beginning of the movie, with her like pointing out the hologram or trying to pull the mask off of the demon. But then they just forget to ever mention that, oh wait, we're dealing with actual supernatural nonsense.
Yeah. Zarkos spots Daphne in the spotlight. Demon Rex demands that he be put into the canine body. The soul-removing pincher gets closer to Scooby's chest. Daphne finally turns on the spotlight and points it at the mirror, only for the mirror to be knocked down by a celebrating demon. She readjusts, but she's stopped by Zarkos. Scooby's soul has left his body, and Demon Rex begins to enter. So a voluptuous winged female fish demon becomes suspicious of a sweating Fred. Scooby's soul is put into a tube. Scooby's body then grows 40 times its size and is demonized. This is now Scooby Rex. Fred has been called out. The gang needs to act now. Shaggy gets to the control box. Velma is off to fix the mirror. Fred attempts to find the key. Scooby Rex tries to stop them. Zarkos and Daphne fight. She's about to get tied up, but this time she's able to fight back and kicks Zardos through the hole in the ceiling, falling to his demise, which no one acknowledges. Daphne just killed someone.
Yeah.
She actually murdered someone. In the PG-rated movie, she has murdered someone.
Yeah.
Fred finds the key under Scooby's mattress. And right next to it is actually the equation 12 plus 7 equals 19. So I didn't include this just because it seemed to be distracting throughout the series. So there's a moment in the beginning where Daphne says, like, Scooby, you're a moron. And he's like, I'm not a moron. And he like tries to put the equation down like 12 plus 7 equals, and he keeps on getting it wrong. And throughout the movie, he tries this equation over and over and over and over again. And then finally we get the reveal when he finally gets this equation right. And that is the moment that we see that he did the right thing and he stole the key for the control panel. Shaggy now gets control of the control station before Rex could squash him and catches the key from Fred. Daphne flicks on the spotlight and into the mirror. I think she says it in the movie where it's like, who are you? And Velma goes, the Velmster, which was the nickname that Fred gave her earlier. There's a demon that goes like, what are you? And she goes, I'm a hero.
Aww.
I don't think that was in the movie.
Nope.
I know it's cheesy, but I kind of like that moment.
Yeah, anything that has Velma being awesome is worthy enough to be in a movie.
Yeah. The beam hits all of the other mirrors, destroying most of the demons. Shaggy takes control of the control panel, sees that it functions similar to the crane game that he was playing in the airport, which I'm kind of confused by, like, who puts a crane game in the airport? I guess there's some airports that have arcades in them, but like, I just thought it was weird that it was just like forced in there and that's the only place they could put it in. He removes the demon Rex from Scooby's body and is expelled through the soul vortex. Suddenly, all the demons are expelled out of all the human bodies. The vortex stops spinning and the souls return to their respective bodies. It's quiet. Daphne repels down to the rest of the gang, and all the formerly possessed bodies begin to wake up, including the bodies around the world. And of course, Scooby-Doo. The gang hugs each other and celebrates. Isabel hugs her cousin, Shaggy. Fred and Daphne kiss. Scooby finds Shaggy, leaps into the air, knocking him over, and begins licking his face. Suddenly, Mondrovius, seeing that his plan has been ruined, orders Ungu to kill Shaggy, but Scooby swoops in and saves his best friend. We cut to Mondrovius and Ungu being arrested and visibly beaten up. The press is there to ask the gang some questions. Fred steps aside and lets Velma answer the questions. Turns out Mondrovius is not who he appears to be. Velma then removes his mask to reveal that it was Garrett Rogers, Shaggy's uncle, so that Scooby could be part of his evil plan. But we've been thwarted because she now pulls off another mask to reveal that it was Fred Jones, so that the Mystery Inc. could be back in the spotlight. But wait, Fred and Mondrovius have been in the same room together. Obviously, it couldn't be Fred Jones because the real villain is Don Knotts.
Oh, Don Knotts.
Well, what do you think you saw?
Don Knotts. Ooh, Don Knotts. Don Knotts.
They don't make glue like they used to.
And Don Knotts wouldn't have gotten away with it if it weren't for these meddling kids, because he was seeking revenge for what Scooby did at his Christmas party and for Fred taking the credit for the Moody Manor mystery that he solved.
Oh my goodness.
I do like that reveal that it's just Don Knotts.
That's way better. Well, that actually happened in a cartoon, and I think it was the Johnny Bravo episode.
Maybe?
Jinkies?
Hop in, stranger. Don't worry, I don't bite.
Does she? Oh.
I was about to make this whole joke about how I wanted an R-rated Scooby-Doo because Johnny Bravo, I think, did it the best way of showing how Fred always wanted to be with Daphne because he was always like, Daphne, we should go together. Johnny Bravo being the weirdo of the group, hitting on Velma, like, it was great. Like, and I think that the person was Don Knotts. So that would have been so cool.
Now, let's see who the ghostly gardener really is. Don Knotts!
And Don Knotts, his final line is, I am Knotts. I am the master of hell. All shall bow before my unwielding power. You stupid sons of... And then the door slams on him.
Oh, that's great. Oh.
Alexa is absolutely right that there was something.
Oh.
There was Bravo Doobie Doo, where Don Knotts made a cameo appearance as one of the villain's red herring disguises.
So it wasn't officially Don Knotts as the villain. He was just one of them.
But then Don Knotts comes in as like a recurring character in Johnny Bravo's stuff. And it looks like this is a special that was released in 1997, so well before this movie. I mean, before the movie was even written, either James Gunn had seen this special or multiple people thought it would be funny that
Don Knotts would be the villain, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it was funny in the Johnny Bravo cartoon. I would have appreciated this movie more because it would reference my favorite Scooby-Doo episode, which was not a Scooby-Doo episode.
Don Knotts' last appearance in Johnny Bravo was a episode called Johnny Makeover.
Weird Al Yankovic, Don Knotts, and myself, the Blue Falcon, can do.
To the Makeover Mobile!
Be all you can be with the help of these three. Weird Al, Don Knotts, and Blue Falcon.
So really, what should have been made was a Johnny Bravo movie.
Yes.
And Scooby-Doo just happened to be there with Josie and the Pussycats.
Yes.
I would have watched that.
So we do an interesting cut where a TV shuts off. So it turns out they were watching a news program, and we are in Daphne's dining room. Shaggy is wearing a shirt with a demon eating a baby.
Oh.
It's revealed that Velma has a professorship at Yale. Fred has pre-sold 200,000 copies of his new book, Why Skeptics Suck Ass. And Daphne is the lead in the film Mean Hard Revenge 2. On the way to their cars, Shaggy reveals to Daphne that he got a mysterious call from the Jell-O Pudding Factory about a Jell-O chocolate pudding monster. They all go their respective ways, but curiosity gets the best of them and they reunite. They cancel their plans. They get in the mystery machine and they take off to the Jell-O factory. We get the iconic Scooby-Doo, and Fred tries the same thing with his name and it fails. And that is the end of the movie.
That's awesome.
Scooby-Doo, where are you? We got some things to do now. Scooby-Doo, where are you? We need some help from you now.
Obviously, the film ended up getting made, and the reason why I wanted to cover this is just because this original script, or at least this draft of the script, even though it was both James Gunn to the end, it was so vastly different.
Yes.
Now knowing this script and having watched the Scooby-Doo 2002, what are your impressions on that movie, and what are your impressions now knowing this script?
It just seems like whether we got the R-rated version or the family-friendly version, either way, something sucked really bad. There were some good parts of the R-rated version and the family-friendly version. I just don't remember them right now because I would have loved a little bit more history. I know I'm like in the minority here. I would have loved to have seen a lot more of an edgy, oh, they broke up. I actually really loved that. I love that the reveal wasn't Scrappy. I thought, first of all, the CGI. This is probably a movie that you had to grow up with, because for me, I love Josie and the Pussycats. And showing that to David, he was probably confused as to how I would watch this and love it. For me, I've experienced that with Scooby-Doo. I didn't like the whole Scrappy storyline. Like, I think I knew that Scrappy was the villain because Mondrovius was scratching himself, and I was like, that's exactly what a dog does. So that's Scrappy. Already, I was just waiting for the end for them to be like, oh, it's Scrappy this whole time. Yeah. I was over it by that point. I do like that there are some nods to the R-rated version. I love that we're like, oh, we're finally going to see Stoner, Shaggy, and Scooby, and it turns out they were sandwiches, which made it even funnier. I love that the girl was renamed from Candy to Mary Jane, also funny. Other than that, I didn't see the point of her character. I do like that in this version, the version that we got, Velma is definitely showing her bisexual tendencies. I'm just speaking from experience again.
You're talking about one moment where she tickles Daphne?
That was one moment. There was another moment where she was describing Daphne and Fred.
And Daphne, so beautiful. She was the coolest girl at Coolsville High. Fred, oh, he was so handsome. And he really knew how to accessorize.
I was like, oh, she's into Daphne. And then she talks about Fred being the most handsome. I was like, okay, she's also into Fred. She also wants to be paired up with Fred. Or probably with Daphne. She probably wouldn't have minded that either. Either way, I know one when I see one. Because I am one. So yes, that's something that I enjoyed. And apparently we get more of that in a later movie, but then that requires me to watch it. So I don't know if I'm willing to sacrifice my time for that. There is definitely a lot of problematic jokes. They were cut for a reason, but for some reason decided to just tell them in a different way, hoping it would be better.
And it wasn't.
And it wasn't. Very interesting points.
To me, these two scripts aren't that different. The version we read, the PG-13 version, definitely had, some more of those adult jokes in it. I feel like it was still the same kind of comedy. I mean, we still had the burp and fart competition. It still felt like the same kind of movie, And neither of them seemed like a movie that is for me. But I will say, whether or not we got the PG-13 version or the version we got, the best part of the movie would still be there, and that is the cast. Because the casting for this movie is perfect for every single person.
That's true.
The other thing that the PG-13 movie has that is vastly superior is Don Knotts being the villain.
Yeah.
That is perfect. That's the best thing in that whole script.
That's my favorite part because it was still a mystery that was like almost like a throwaway conversation about like the turds in the Christmas tree.
It's such a dumb bit that makes it so good.
Yeah. And the Scrappy one, like, I think it was just such a tiring storyline. Like, they show a flashback to Scrappy, which shows that, oh, that means Scrappy's gonna come back in some capacity.
I know.
He hasn't shown up this entire time. I much more prefer a seamless joke that was thrown in there and you don't think anything of it other than like, okay, haha, funny. And then you go, oh, no, this is really funny.
I mean, I kind of wish it wasn't set up. I would love it if, like, Don Knotts was not mentioned at all in the entire movie and then just is the villain at the end.
That's even funnier. I do like the fact that they just reveal him and he goes, remember that Christmas time? And then the turds and all this stuff. And they're like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, seriously, I'm taking revenge for that time in the Christmas party. Like, he explains it so many times to the point of like, you know what? This whole thing wasn't even worth it because you don't even remember what you did to me. Like, it's just, that would have made it funnier. Absolutely.
I think this falls in the line of like both of the movies. And I think, David, we had talked about this earlier, where it's either got to be a man behind the mask or it's got to be a supernatural. I'm kind of with you on this, where the formula is that the supernatural is not real and something logical, scientific has to be able to explain what's going on. And obviously you can make the scale bigger from just a 30-minute episode or an hour-long episode. Like, obviously it's going to be a movie. Some of the things that I really enjoyed and I think bled its way into the final script was the fact that you are dealing with a dysfunctional dynamic which seemed functional in the TV show.
I do like that a lot.
I love the first scene of the film where they're in the warehouse. Well, aside from having the Pamela Anderson reveal.
Yeah.
That was definitely shoot in to be like, no, it's like, you don't need to do that. But like, I love that you are basically at the end of their mystery where they unmask someone and it brings you back to the familiar of what they are doing, to realize that in those little moments that each of the characters are kind of bothered by something, especially with Velma being bothered with Fred. Throughout the film, you are then dealing with the character dynamics, and I think that really pushes the story forward. As far as the actual mystery goes, I think you can still do a man behind the mask, but instead of doing something like that, like you can...
It's Pamela Anderson.
Yeah, it's Pamela Anderson. I think you can do like a Wizard of Oz type reveal. It's not a man behind the mask. It's a man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And he is putting on a huge spectacle. And you kind of saw it with like the hologram. Like you can make things bigger, grander. You bring them onto Spooky Island, which is in the name itself, where you can set up rides and such, which are scary and even potentially dangerous as well. You can put their lives in danger. You can finally come up with definitive answers for relationships, especially when you have Fred and Daphne. And reading this script, seeing how Fred and Daphne work together, would it be better off if they just did not kiss and they just said, hey, we just realized we're just not good together. We had our chance. It's gone. It's past. We have to move on. And they finally define the relationship, even if it's not the relationship together, but they know that they don't work together and they're better off apart.
Yeah, and then like Velma and Daphne start kissing and go, this makes sense. So that's the Alexa ending.
Yeah. So speaking of which, let's go into kind of other drafts as well, or like variations of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was the draft that I found. Supposedly, there was another draft where they leaned more into Shaggy being a stoner, and at least the references were more obvious, and we saw this in the movie as well when he meets Mary Jane.
I'm Mary Jane.
Like, that is my favorite name.
Really?
Yeah.
Matthew Lillard revealed in a 2012 Reddit AMA that Fred was going to be gay, and Freddie Prinze Jr. actually portrayed the character as such.
Makes a lot of sense.
Another character that was supposed to come out of the closet was Velma.
Okay, so I just want to show to the entire world that Alexa was right once again.
Exactly.
I'm usually right on Fahuga Pods, but never on How Did This Not Get Made, so this is even better.
From another tweet from James Gunn, he actually wrote the character as gay, and he said, quote, "I tried. In 2001, Velma was explicitly gay in my original script, but the studio just kept watering it down and watering it down, becoming ambiguous, which was the version that was shot. Then there was Nothing, which was the release version. And then finally, she has a boyfriend, which was in the sequel."
Well, they tried. Yeah.
Even though a lot was cut and changed in the script, they did film the movie as if they were going to receive a PG-13 rating. But after the MPAA screenings and receiving an R rating, WB thought it would be best for this to be a family film and not a teen sex comedy, which were very popular at the time. Think about it. This is around the time that American Pie came out, The New Guy, Road Trip. So many of the scenes had to be cut from the film, and many of them are actually included as deleted scenes on the DVD extras. There is even an on-screen kiss between Daphne and Velma to get them to switch souls.
Yeah.
Which was then shot and cut out of the film. Also, Sarah Michelle Gellar's cleavage was taken out using CGI. This is pretty obvious during the scene when the gang is like exchanging souls with each other around the demon Ritus. So in her medium close-up, you can actually see like her chest is like unusually smooth, but then in the wide shot, they didn't bother to change anything, thinking that no one would notice, but they are vastly different from each other.
They really don't understand the audience who would always just be looking for that.
No. Another scene that was cut was when Velma is possessed and she's actually dancing around in a bikini. And then another scene, we see Daphne's soul being removed from her body.
Interesting.
Now, David, you mentioned the cast before, because looking at the cast members and their filmography at the time, they were filled with teen-centered movies and horror movies. So think Freddie Prinze Jr. He did She's All That. I Know What You Did Last Summer, Boys and Girls, Head Over Heels. Sarah Michelle Gellar, she's doing Buffy, Scream 2, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Cruel Intentions. Matthew Lillard, he just did Scream, SLC Punk, Hackers, She's All That, 13 Ghosts, and Linda Cardellini did Freaks and Geeks, Dead Man on Campus, and The Unsaid. Like, this was an all-star cast, and they would have made a great, dark, and funny Scooby-Doo movie. And all of this just seemed to be squandered away. Something else worth mentioning is the voice of Scooby-Doo. So even though Frank Welker, who voices Fred and Scooby after Don Masick passed away, he is still around. And they went to an unknown actor and stuntman, Neil Fanning. Not to bash on Fanning, because honestly, I think he did a really good job voicing Scooby.
Yeah, I think he did, yeah.
I just think it would have been really nice to include Frank Welker as like a nod and having a connection to the original cartoon. I would have loved that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming, knowing what we know about the Australian film tax incentive from our Justice League Mortal episode, since they filmed in Australia, more specifically the WB Movie World theme park in the Tangalooma Island, the production needed more Australian cast members to qualify for the incentive, and Neil Fanning is an Australian actor. I think that's why they did it, but still.
So is Isla Fisher.
Yes.
Borat's wife, yes. Just
The film was theatrically released on June 14th, 2002, and was a financial success, making over $50 million during its opening weekend and over $275 million during its box office run. Regardless of the poor reviews, that movie would go on to have a sequel, Scooby-Doo 2: Monsters Unleashed, released in March 2004, with not only the same cast, but the same director and the same writer, James Gunn. They both came back to make this film. The film got even worse reviews than the first, and made about half the amount the first film did in the box office, even though the film was a financial success, making just over $180 million WB didn't think it performed well enough to greenlight a third movie, which they had soft plans for. Again, James Gunn, in a tweet, revealed what the plot would be for Scooby-Doo 3, stating, "The Mystery Inc. gang are hired by a town in Scotland who complained they're plagued by monsters. But we discover throughout the film the monsters are actually the victims, and Scooby and Shaggy have to come to terms with their own prejudices and narrow belief system."
I kind of like that idea.
Yeah. Now, the Scooby-Doo franchise still continues as TV shows, video games, straight-to-video movies, including 2 live-action made-for-TV films, Scooby-Doo, The Mystery Begins, and Scooby-Doo, Curse of the Lake Monster. Those 2 films brought in Frank Welker to voice Scooby. We also got a live-action direct-to-video spin-off, Daphne and Velma, which came out in 2018, which did not include Scooby, Fred, or Shaggy. Scooby-Doo nearly saw another theatrical release with the film Scoob, this time a computer animated film. The film was originally scheduled to be released in September 21st, 2018, and then was pushed back to May 15th, 2020. Now, unfortunately, because something weird happened in the world, they could not release it in theaters and instead had to release it on their platform, HBO Max. Now, there were plans to make a spin-off prequel, Scoob, Holiday Hunt, but it was recently announced that the film was canceled as one of the many productions that were discontinued during the Warner Brothers Discovery merger. Now, news of this is still coming out as we are recording this, so I'm not going to dwell on this as much as we did when we talked about Netflix and Nimona, because I just want to know more about this. I will be covering this for our finale episode, though. And then before we go, something that I want to mention. So Scooby-Doo is a very large franchise, and it's hard to figure out like what to watch just because, From doing my research, I do have some recommendations if you do want to start diving back into Scooby-Doo. I will say that the original run, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, that still holds up, and the confusingly titled the Scooby-Doo movie series with all the guest stars, they're pretty great as well. If you have kids, A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, also great. With the straight-to-video movies, the best movie that has come out is Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. That was the first movie that was made by Warner Brothers. That is considered the best straight-to-video Scooby-Doo movie. I recently discovered Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Now, this is a series that came out in 2010, which incorporates more modern-day TV storytelling, along with a Monster of the Week episode. There is also an overarching mystery that lingers throughout the series. Yeah, it is really good, although I will say that it kind of struggles to pass the Bechdel test. But Velma is horny for Shaggy.
Okay.
And it is kind of weird, but if you can look past it, like the series is actually really, really well done. It's one of my favorite series that I've done.
I did ship them back in the day, so
yeah.
You know what, maybe I can handle it. Personally, I would want to have a Riverdale treatment on Scooby-Doo. That's how you'll get me to watch it, because that sounds terrible and trashy in the best way possible.
Yeah.
They took a lot of liberties with Riverdale, so doing that for a TV show, I think would be even funnier.
Yeah.
And just more fodder for me.
Coming soon to the CW, Coolsville.
Yes. Ooh.
If you are looking for an R-rated Scooby-Doo, I recommend going to the graphic novels and the comics.
Oh. I thought you were going to say Mystery Team.
No. There's a series called Scooby Apocalypse, which is a reimagining of the gang in an apocalyptic world. And they are just badass versions of the gang.
Oh.
Like Shaggy is kind of like a hipster. Velma, she has these big goggle glasses. I think she's operating a drone in this one. Scooby has this headset on, which like shoots out bubble emojis to express like what he's saying. And you have Fred, who's like super muscular, and then he's
a gym bro.
Yeah,
right?
and then he kind of always has been. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Daphne is just like badass in her eggplant jumpsuit. And they are in a world where this nanite virus, which was supposed to help calm down the world. So like they'd find people who are just like overly aggressive. It's supposed to go out and just like keep them, I guess, docile in a way. So like you would prevent wars this way. People won't get upset with each other. People would get along. And then something in that nanite virus that was produced in a lab that Velma has been working for goes wrong and turns these people into monsters and just starts destroying everyone. And they all have to like get together. They all gather into this lab and they all have to like try and fight different types of monsters, which is actually really cool. Like each issue deals with like a variation of these mutations. So like one variation is like the vampire monsters. Another variation is like the zombie monsters. And it's just so cool.
It's like Smallville with kryptonite. Yeah. So now I changed my mind. Now that you've mentioned this novel, I think I want the Harley Quinn treatment.
Yeah.
With Scooby-Doo, that would be something that gets me to watch it 24/7.
That's a really interesting take. And then if you're looking for an X-rated Scooby-Doo, there is Scooby-Doo in XXX parody.
What's the link to that, just for my curiosity?
Well, whatever link I'm going to send you, it keeps on getting shut down, so... But yeah, that's supposedly the R-rated Scooby-Doo.
All right. Any other final thoughts on this project?
Ruh-roh.
Well, thank you, everybody, so much for listening. If you want to find more episodes of this podcast, you can go check out our website, pipedreampodcast.com, which is also the home of Come On Fahoogwapods, Escape from Vault Disney, The Mystery Shack Look Back, and Pod Made You Special. While you're there, you can check out links to our social media pages. We are on Instagram at How Did This Not Get Made? We're on Twitter at HDTNGM. And you can send us your emails, notgetmade@gmail.com. We would love to hear your suggestions, corrections, or anything else that you want to share with us. If you want to support this show, the best way you can do that is to support us on Patreon. We're so thankful for all of our supporters who can help keep this show and our other shows going. That's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening.
Thank you.
Not nuts!